The irony is fresh this morning. After this past couple weeks of all the American pro-Israel types calling out any critic of Israel and saying that they're just a bunch of racists and that how could you ever criticize Israel, you just hate the Jews, you terrible person. Well, this week, Netanyahu came out and said himself that Israel is in fact an inherently racist state. Apparently one of Netanyahu's talking points this election cycle is that, hey, if you don't vote for me, Mr. Bibi, Arabs might get elected, and Arabs are scary, as we all know. And so an actress in Israel said something on Instagram to the effect of, do I need to remind certain members of our government that Arabs are full citizens, so what difference does it make if they happen to make it into government as well? And Bibi had the balls to come out and correct her and said, no, Arabs are not equal. Israel is a Jewish state for the Jews. Israel is not for the Arabs. I believe the exact quote was, Israel is not a state for all its citizens. So not only does Bibi admit to discriminating heavily against and oppressing the Arabs in the West Bank and Gaza, but now he's saying, yeah, Arabs in Israel proper who have full citizenship, they're not really full citizens. Sure, we call them citizens so that we can brag about it on the world stage and say, oh, look, we treat our Arabs equally. There are Arab citizens of Israel, but there are no Jewish citizens of any of the Arab countries, blah, blah, blah. But the only reason, of course, that there are any Arab citizens of Israel is that the Haganah was not able to completely ethnically cleanse the country during al-Nakba, and there were some Arabs that they left behind and were unable to push out of the country. What I find particularly delicious is that the pro-Israel types always like to call it out when you see Palestinian civilians waving flags or signs that say anti-Semitic things, or paint swastikas on things, to mock the Israeli troops. But they never point out when Bibi says overtly racist things. And Bibi, mind you, is not some random civilian running around the West Bank. He is, in fact, the Prime Minister of Israel and has been, and he's been elected, I don't know how many terms to Parliament, and he's also not Hamas, which was only elected once and then has sort of served a perpetual term. The Israeli people, after hearing everything that Bibi has said, they've had a chance to vote him out every election year, and they really haven't for the most part. You have no idea if Palestinian popular opinion even lines up with Mahmoud Abbas or with Hamas, the two governing bodies of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, respectively. But we can say for certain that Bibi has won elections legitimately for many terms and has been the prime minister for like a decade. Not only that, all of these folks who are complaining about and hand-wringing over anti-Semitism now have had Netanyahu on their shows in many cases, in the case of someone like Glenn Beck or Bill O'Reilly. Could you imagine if there was someone who back in the 70s had Ian Smith of Rhodesia, who, I think kind of gets a bad rap, but, compared to Netanyahu, he's kind of similar. Could you imagine if somebody had Ian Smith on their show multiple times and gave them softball interviews and then defended them whenever the topic of Rhodesia came up? It was a pariah state, and for understandable reasons. Could you imagine if there were a substantial contingent, or actually not just a substantial contingent, the whole of the mainstream media, if the whole of the mainstream media backed the South African government during the apartheid era? Even in the 60s and 70s, that would seem insane. But here we are in 2019, and we have the whole of mainstream politics in America backing the Israeli government. So I think it's safe to say that the mainstream media is hand-wringing over racism constantly, whether it's in defense of Obama or Israel or who else, or in attack of Trump. It's clearly pure political opportunism. And they're trying to appeal to the good instincts of Americans, who obviously are not racist, despite what many folks on the left tend to think. The average person is not racist. Netanyahu clearly is, though, and he seems to think that the state of Israel itself, by definition, is inherently racist. So anyway, if you've got anything of value out of this video, I'd very much appreciate you clicking that like button and subscribing if you want to hear more. I do upload every day, and I will continue to do that in perpetuity. Also, I very much appreciate if you want to share any of my content. I greatly appreciate it. Have a great day.